I also think that there are a couple of rumors that are completely untrue. So you can tell that I'm African and I am of I'm an indigenous African of African descent, both ways on my parents. I think there are rumors going around that, you know, indigenous Africans couldn't get it. That's madness. Also, the fact that young people can't get it. I'm 29 years old. I think I'm still considered young to the majority of the world, and I definitely did get it. Hi guys, my name is Naledi Radebe and I tested positive for COVID-19. I felt my first symptom when I was in London, and that was Sunday the 15th of March. My first symptom was a shortness of breath. That same day I booked a flight to fly back to South Africa, arrived in South Africa on the 16th of March and went to go test that morning. In the period that I was waiting for my results, up until that point, I'd originally believed that I'd gotten it in the UK, just because it just seemed like the most feasible option. But while I was waiting for my results during that week, I got a phone call from a friend in South Africa who said to me, hey, listen, have you been experiencing any symptoms? And I said, why? And they said, well, I was actually in contact with someone who's positive for COVID-19, and I think I am too. And I said, well, that's interesting because I just went to go test. I've been showing symptoms. And so I kind of established that the contraction point was actually a day or two before I flew to the UK. I flew to the UK on the 11th of March. So if you calculate from that point, I only really felt my first symptom about 6 days in. The way that it really happened was that we shared a cab ride together, and then we hugged at the end of the cab ride because I was getting home, and I got out the cab, and you know, and that was it. So COVID-19 kind of moves like how a flu moves, you know, it moves through droplets. Droplets that sometimes sit in the air for a very short period of time though, but droplets can be transmitted through a sneeze or a cough, or even talking. If you guys check the World Health Organization, they've also said that, you know, through talking, you know, you kind of like, you know, you're spitting as you're talking, but not like consciously spitting, and you know, somebody picks it up that way, or through surfaces, because it can last for a long time on a surface. And let's say somebody sneezes, or they, you know, do this, and then they put their hand on the surface, and you touch that same surface a couple of hours later, and you end up accidentally, non-consciously touching your face, because we do so often, and contracting it like that. So it moves with ease. This is not something that requires extraordinary measures to be transmitted from one body to the next. Which is, I suppose, the reason why the lockdown is just so important. If we're going to talk about the process in which I was waiting for my results, so just the Monday, the 16th of March, I tested. I was meant to get my results on the 18th of March, which was the Wednesday. Wednesday came, nothing. Thursday came, nothing. Friday, nothing. Just got a phone call letting me know that they were backlogged essentially at the labs, and that means that there are too many people testing at that point. Now, I think it's very important to identify the fact that it's a private healthcare sector, and of course, I can imagine why it would have been backlogged, because a lot of people that were coming back were going to test to make sure that just even find out if they had it or not. So yeah, private healthcare system was definitely backlogged, and so it was 8 days before I actually got my results. So obviously that period of waiting was very, it was just full of just, felt like purgatory. It felt like, oh my god, like, will I ever know? Are these results ever gonna come? You know, it's really just an unsettling feeling to kind of not know where you're at. It wasn't a situation of no news is good news, you know, how you normally would take it. For me, it was very much, okay, I must sit in self-isolation until I know the facts. I think that knowledge came from having friends who are doctors, who I sought advice from, who told me that the most significant symptom that you can have, you know, is the shortness of breath, because it is a respiratory virus rather. And so even though I was actually quite asymptomatic and I had no fever, I had or at least initially, I had no fever, I had no headache, I had no shortness of breath, I had no sore throat. It was very much just me knowing that I was struggling to breathe and me feeling that I had difficulty breathing, rather than it being an outward thing that you could tell that I was sick. When I went to go get my test, my doctor took my vitals. He checked my oxygen saturation, which is basically your levels if you're getting enough oxygen. He checks my fever to make sure that I'm good, and I'm sitting at a reasonable fever, I think 37.5 or something. And then he checked my lungs with the stethoscope to hear my breathing, and if I had, let's say, something developed a pneumonia of sorts, you would hear a crinkling sound or liquid inside my in my lungs, which he did not hear. And so he's looking at me, he's taken all my vitals, I look normal, and I'm so asymptomatic to the point that he thinks I just have asthma, and he prescribes me an asthma pump and anxiety medication, which, I mean, given the circumstances, as a doctor who's never really dealt with a pandemic like this before, or ever seen asymptomatic, I can imagine why it made sense to give me the asthma pump, you know, and to give me anxiety medication to calm down. And it really wasn't a bad call at all, because the asthma pump ended up giving me some relief. The biggest thing about this is, and the most important thing about the lockdown, guys, and also just like mixing that with my experience, is that the reason why we're having the lockdown is that it's for the sake of the healthcare system. So what we don't want to happen is for everyone to get sick at one time, and for everybody to need to go to the hospital, because there's not going to be enough resources to go around for everyone. There's not going to be enough hands in the hospitals, and essentially it's just going to be a massive burden on the healthcare system. And so we're in a lockdown because we're trying to cull the growth of the spread, or we're rather trying to contain the spread. The term that they like to use is flatten the curve of the spread, to calm it down, so that really what you have is like a trickling into the healthcare system, so that, you know, there's not everyone all at once getting sick, but, you know, a couple of people getting sick, then being able to help those people, so that everyone essentially gets treated. Because I think that's one of the biggest things of why there's been fatalities, is that, and if you look at the situation with Italy, there weren't enough resources, there weren't enough hands, and at some point, I think, doctors would have to make choices between who they could save and who they couldn't, which is obviously one of the hardest decisions as a doctor you'd have to make. So the point of the lockdown is to make it so that a doctor doesn't have to make that choice, so that everyone has the time and resources to be taken care of, or to take care of a COVID-19 patient. Again, another point of the lockdown is that, okay, the majority of us will likely live through this. The majority of us will have immune systems that can fight this off, and we can kind of push through. And then there will be, you know, a small percentage of people that will need to go into the ICU or go to be hospitalized, and there will be a small percentage of people that will succumb to the virus. And it's those people that we're really worried about. We have to start caring about the ones that are vulnerable. We live in a country that is considered high risk. We haven't really seen it play out yet, but, you know, you can presume that HIV and tuberculosis don't need a respiratory virus in addition to, you know, to make them worse. In terms of anxiety and fear, I don't think that we should be in a space where we're all constantly scared of what's going to happen. I think knowledge is power. I think the more that we understand about it, the more that we're able to handle it, the more that we're able to react, the more that we're able to calmly treat ourselves, because there is no cure, there is no vaccine at the moment, and there's no use in panicking in a situation like that. I was told when I found out that I tested positive that I should treat it symptom to symptom basis. So that means if I have a headache, take a Panado. You know, if I have a sore throat, have a lozenge and have a Strepsil, something to cure my throat. If I have, you know, like a cough, take cough medication. It is all very reactionary. You treat the symptom as it appears. You don't just medicate for the sake of medicating, and you don't just, you know, leave it, not unless you believe in more natural ways of taking care of yourself, in which case, yeah, sure. If you're able to care for yourself, engage in personal hygiene, distance yourself from others, you are essentially doing your loved ones a favor, those ones that are around your loved ones a favor, and the vulnerable, essentially. Most importantly, when you feel that first symptom, go into self-isolation. That will be your strongest defense against spreading it to others, and that's essentially what you don't want to do. So go into self-isolation, monitor yourself, and it's really just all about knowing yourself and being able to read your body. You know when you're sick. The same way I knew when I was sick. I was told, you know, I've got asthma, blah, blah, blah. And I just knew, I just knew myself. I know how I operate, and I knew something larger was amiss. And it was based on that instinct that I was able to take the precautionary measures that I did take, to make sure that I culled as much, I stopped as much exposure to others as I could. Of course, everything is being tested out, you know. We can't now turn around at the end of the lockdown and say, well, that was ridiculous or it was a waste of time. No, because it's playing out in real time, because we've never had to live through a pandemic, there's just no way that you can only take the best measures, you can only take the best steps and the best measures that you can. There's no rule book around this. There's nothing to say that, you know, this is going to work. Everything in retrospect will show us what worked and what didn't. But we've just got to give ourselves the best chance by adhering to any suggestion by anyone that knows a little bit more than we do. So yeah, I think my final message is just take care of yourself, take care of those around you, and keep safe. And it really is our civic duty to make sure that we do as much as we can to contain this. And I appreciate a culture of sharing, which is the reason why I'm so willing to share my story. And I hope that it has helped in some way to inform people. And if you'd like to check out my page, you can. I have a COVID tab on my page that is on the highlighters, and it just gives you some information, some stuff that I've learned along the way. Really, the information that I give you is from the perspective of a patient. Of course, I've had conversations with doctors and people that know a lot more than I do, but I think probably hearing it from a patient or from a human being gives random facts a lot more meaning. Anyway, guys, take care, and thank you for listening.